Now that we have a cache layer, let's bring it into our API layer. So in the API folder, look at listings.js. Here we have this function for getting the listings from the server. Now we should change the logic here. So if we can successfully get the data from the server, we should store it in the cache. And if the call to the server fails for any reasons, then we should get the data from the cache, assuming it's available. But we don't want to implement that logic here, because if tomorrow we decide to cache the list of messages as well, then we'll have to duplicate that logic somewhere else. So we want to have a single place for providing data from the cache. And that is our client module here. This is the only module that knows how to call the server. So our caching logic should also be implemented here, right? So on the top, let's import cache from, we go up to utility/cache. So we create an API client. Now this client object has a method for getting data from the server. We should change the implementation of this method. So if we can't call the server, we can look for the data in the cache. But how can we change the implementation of this method? Very easy. First, we get a reference to this method and store it in a separate constant. Then we redefine API client.get. So we set it to a new function. In this function, we can call the original get method, in this case, the get function. And in addition to this, we can execute some code before and or after the call to the get function. This is how we can change the implementation of the get method. So look at the parameters of the get function. We have URL, params, and access config. We should add these parameters here as well. So our new get method has the same signature as the old one. So we can use it the same way, okay? So we add URL, params, and access config. And then we pass this as arguments to the original get function. So URL, params, and access config. So this function returns a promise. We await it to get a response. Now we should mark this as async. Now, if we can successfully call the server, so if response is okay, then we're going to store the data in the cache. So we call cache.store. For the key, I'm going to pass URL. And for the value, I'm going to pass response.data. Now, in this implementation, we're caching every GET request. In your app, this might not make sense. You may want to create a blacklist or a whitelist to cache certain requests, okay? So you store the data in the cache. Now, what should we return? We shouldn't return response.data. We should return the same object as the original get function. What does the original get function return? The response object. So let's return the response object. Now, if we get to this point, that means the call to the server failed. Maybe the server is offline or we don't have internet connection. Either way, you want to look for the data in the cache. So we call cache.get. For the key, I'm going to pass URL. This returns a promise. So we will wait it to get the data. Now, what should we return? Well, if the data exists, we should return an object that looks like a successful response. So we return an object with two properties, OK, which we set to true, and data. These are the only two properties that we really care about when using our API layer, right? So if we have the data, we return this simulated successful response. Otherwise, we want to return the original response object because this object contains information about why the call to the server failed, okay? So we're pretty much done here. Let's test our implementation. So save the changes. Here's our app. So I'm going to reload it. Now all the data should be stored in the cache. To test this, I'm going to turn off my Wi-Fi. So real quick. Okay, my Wi-Fi is off. Now let's reload the app. All right, our listings are here. These are the listings that we previously retrieved from the server. But the images are not here because we haven't cached the images. We have only cached the JSON object that we got from the server. That is an array of listings. In the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to cache the images as well.